The first sign something was wrong wasn't the orange survey flags or the rumble of machinery. It was the sound of a bicycle bell, cheerful and sharp, ringing through my pasture like it belonged there. I was standing at the edge of my land just after sunrise, coffee still steaming in my hand, when I saw them. 3 cyclists. Helmets. Neon jerseys. Pedaling casually across grass that had been grazed by my cattle for generations. Behind them, a bright ribbon of crushed limestone cut cleanly through my pasture, curving toward the creek like a scar that hadn't bothered to scab. For a moment, my brain refused to process it. My land, my pasture, my cattle fence, gone, replaced by a bike path. I felt something hot and electric crawl up my spine. This wasn't some abandoned field or unused acreage. This was active cattle land. 60 acres of rolling pasture, deeded, taxed, insured, and worked by my family since before the town had a name. And now, without a phone call, a letter, or so much as a knock on my door, the homeowners association from the subdivision half a mile away had decided it was theirs to redesign. One cyclist waved at me. Actually waved. "Beautiful morning," he called, like we were neighbors sharing a sidewalk. Behind him, my lead steer, Hank, lifted his massive head, nostrils flaring. Hank doesn't like surprises, and he really doesn't like bicycles. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just trespassing. This was going to get someone seriously hurt, or killed. And if the HOA thought I was just going to roll over and let them turn my working ranch into their weekend recreation trail, they had no idea who they'd just picked a fight with. By the time I reached the cut in the fence, the cyclists were gone, and the path revealed itself in full insult. It was at least 8 feet wide, compacted gravel, professionally done. Signposts already stood at intervals, cheerful green placards with white lettering. Phase 1 complete. Phase 1. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. I walked the length of the path, boots crunching against gravel that hadn't existed yesterday. It sliced straight through my south pasture, crossed the creek at a newly installed wooden bridge, and continued uphill toward land that very definitely did not belong to Meadowbrick community. Every step brought up memories. My father teaching me to mend fence in this very spot. My grandfather pointing out where the herd should shelter during storms. The old oak near the creek where we buried our first working dog. This land wasn't just property, it was history. And someone had bulldozed it with a clipboard and a budget. By mid-morning, the cattle were restless. Cows don't like change, and they like strangers even less. The absence of the fence meant they were wandering closer to the creek than usual, and I could already imagine the liability nightmare forming. A cyclist spooking a cow charging, a lawsuit with my name on it. I pulled out my phone and dialed the county planning office. Straight to voicemail. Next, the sheriff's non-emergency line. "Are they still there?" the dispatcher asked after I explained. "I don't know," I said, "but they built a path across my land." There was a pause. "Sir, built?" "Yes, as in heavy equipment, signs, bridge, the works." Another pause, longer this time. "An officer will be out when available." That was government speak for don't hold your breath. So I did what any reasonable landowner would do. I drove straight to Meadowbrick. The subdivision looked like a postcard version of rural living. Identical houses, manicured lawns, decorative mailboxes shaped like barns. At the center sat a stone sign reading. I parked in front of the HOA office, a converted craftsman house with flower boxes and a flag fluttering out front. Inside, the air smelled like lavender and printer toner. A woman behind the desk smiled brightly. "Hi, welcome to Meadowbrook HOA. How can I help you?" I leaned forward, hands flat on the counter. "You built a bike path on my land." Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, are you with the county?" "No," I said. "I'm the owner." That did it. Her smile wavered, just a hair. "Let me get the board president," she said quickly. A few minutes later, a man in his 50s emerged, polo shirt tucked too neatly into khakis. He extended his hand like this was a networking event. "Good morning. I'm Craig, HOA president." I ignored his hand. "Craig, your association cut a path through my cattle pasture." Craig nodded, unfazed. "Yes, the community trail. It's been in planning for over a year." and at no point did anyone think to check who owned the land. Well, he said carefully, our understanding was that the area was unused agricultural space. Unused. I felt my temper tighten, coiling like a spring. This is active cattle land, I said. There are animals, fences, liability issues, and you are trespassing. Craig gave a thin smile. We believe there may be an easement. There is no easement, I said. Not now. Not ever. He gestured toward a framed map on the wall. Our legal team reviewed. Your legal team is wrong. The room went quiet. Even the receptionist stopped typing. Craig cleared his throat. We're confident this will be resolved amicably. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. You have cyclists riding through land with half-done animals that don't recognize your community amenities. If someone gets hurt, that's on you, and if my cattle get hurt, that's on you too. Craig's smile finally cracked. There's no need for hostility. Oh, I said, straightening up. We're just getting started. As I walked out, I caught sight of a fly on the bulletin board. Bring the kids. Saturday was 3 days away. And unless something changed fast, Meadow Brick was about to learn a very expensive lesson about property lines, livestock, and what happens when you mistake quiet landowners for pushovers. By the time I got back to the ranch, my phone had blown up with voicemails, 2 from neighbors, 1 from the sheriff's office, and somehow 3 from people I didn't know thanking me for allowing public access to such a beautiful space. Public access. I stood at the gate, staring at the broken fence line where my cattle now wandered freely, and felt the kind of anger that doesn't shout, the quiet kind, the kind that plans. First things first, I secured the herd. It took most of the afternoon to rig a temporary fence using spare posts and hot wire, moving the cattle back from the path as best I could. Hank watched me the entire time, chewing slowly, eyes locked on the trail like it was an enemy that might charge at any second. A couple of cyclists passed while I worked. One slowed down and called out, "You should really fence this area better." I didn't respond. I just stared until he pedaled faster. Once the cattle were settled, I went inside and pulled out the metal filing cabinet that lived in the corner of my office, the one that held deeds, plats, and yellow documents older than most of the Meadow Brick houses combined. Dust puffed into the air as I opened it. I hadn't needed to look at these papers in years. My land had never been in dispute. Until now. The deed was exactly where it should be. Clear boundaries. Meets and bound descriptions that followed creeks, tree lines, and survey markers placed long before bike helmets were a thing. No easements. No right-of-way. No exception for community wellness. I spread everything across the desk and started making copies. Then I called my lawyer. "Well," she said after I finished explaining, "that's a new one. Please tell me they can't do this." "They absolutely cannot," she replied. "But the fact that they did means this won't be simple." That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside, wind, coyotes, distant traffic, felt like another trespass. Around midnight, headlights swept across the pasture. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch just in time to see 2 people walking dogs along the bike path. One dog barked at the cattle. Hank snorted and took a step forward. I shouted, "This is private property." One of them yelled back, "The HOA says it's public." That was when I realized the damage wasn't just physical. It was narrative. Meadow Brick had already decided a story where my land was empty, unused, and available, and they'd sold it to hundreds of residents who now believed it. The next morning, the sheriff finally showed up. He was polite, clearly uncomfortable, and very aware that this wasn't a simple shoo-them-off situation. I spoke with the HOA, he said, hands on his belt. They claim there's an easement tied to a future greenway plan. There's no easement, I said, handing him copies of my deed. He scanned the papers, nodded slowly. I'm not saying you're wrong, just saying this is civil, not criminal. So I just let them keep trespassing. For now, he said carefully, I'd advise posting signage. I laughed, short and humorless. They put up signs. On my land. He sighed. I'll note the dispute in my report. By noon, I had my own signs up. Big ones. Fluorescent orange with black lettering. Private property, active cattle land, no trespassing. I placed them every 50 yards along the path. Some cyclists turned around when they saw them. Others rolled past, glancing at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Mid-afternoon, Craig showed up again. This time he brought 2 other board members and a woman I assumed was their lawyer. They stood together near the bridge, clipboards in hand, like they were inspecting a park. Craig smiled. Again, we notice your signs, he said. I notice your bridge, I replied. The lawyer cleared her throat. Mister, just call me the landowner, I said. She pursed her lips. Our preliminary review suggests this land may fall within a legacy access corridor tied to county development plans. Show me, I said. She hesitated. That will take time. Then get off my land until you have proof. Craig folded his arms. With respect, we can't close the path. The grand opening is Saturday. People are excited. I looked past him at the bridge, at the path, at the cyclists rolling by, bells chiming, unaware that a 1,000-pound animal could decide in half a second that they were a threat. Then you're putting people in danger, I said, and you know it. Craig's smile disappeared. Are you threatening us? No, I said. I'm warning you. That evening, I got a call from my insurance agent. Have you made any changes to land access recently? He asked. No, because we've had an inquiry about recreational use. I closed my eyes. They are already setting the stage. Friday morning, I woke up to hoofprints on the bike path. Hank had wandered closer during the night, leaving deep impressions in the gravel. Someone had posted photos online. Love how nature shares a trail. Shares. I took my own photos. Every sign, every cut fence, every board nailed into my soil. Documentation became my weapon. Then I got an email from the county. Subject, Community Greenway Coordination Body. We receive inquiries regarding the Meadow Brick Path. A meeting has been scheduled for Monday. Monday was too late. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. Perfect biking weather. By 9 a.m., cars lined the road near my pasture. Families unloaded bikes. Kids darted toward the trail. Someone set up a folding table with water bottles and balloons. And standing at the entrance of the path, beneath a banner that read Trail Opening Day, was Craig, shaking hands, laughing, acting like a man who had already won. I walked down with my lawyer at my side. She whispered, once they've established public use, it gets messier. I nodded. Then let's make this very clear. I stepped onto the path, blocking the entrance. This land is private, I said loudly. There's active livestock beyond this point. For your safety, you need to leave. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Craig hurried over. You can't do this. I can, I said, and I am. A child rang a bike bell behind me. Hank bellowed from the pasture. And somewhere between those two sounds, the day tipped from a neighborhood celebration into something the HOA would never forget. The bell rang again. Sharp. Bright. Wrong. Hank answered with a deep, rolling bellow that vibrated to the ground like thunder warming up. Every head in the pasture turned toward the bike path at once. 60 sets of dark eyes locking onto movement where there should have been none. I raised a hand. Everyone needs to step back. Now. A few parents hesitated. Others laughed nervously, assuming this was part of the rustic charm Meadow Brick liked to advertise. Craig opened his mouth to speak, but the sound was swallowed by the low, collective murmur of cattle shifting their weight. Cows are prey animals. They don't like unpredictability. And a crowd of squeaking bikes, flapping jackets, and screaming children? That's unpredictability on wheels. One cyclist, mid-30s, expensive bike, confidence unearned, rolled past my shoulder. It's fine, he said. They're used to people. No, I said flatly. They're used to me. He laughed and pedaled forward. Hank dropped his head. That was it. I stepped fully onto the path, arms out. Stop. Too late. Hank charged. Not fast, not wild, but deliberate. A warning charge. The kind meant to say this ends now. Gravel sprayed under his hooves as he closed the distance to the fence line where the path cut through. The cyclist swerved, clipped the edge of the bridge, and went down hard. His bike skidded. He scrambled backward, eyes wide. Screaming erupted. Kids cried. Dogs barked. Someone dropped a water bottle that rolled uselessly toward the creek. I moved fast, faster than Craig, faster than panic. "Hank!" I shouted. "Back!" Hank skidded to a stop, hooves gouging the date, breath huffing out in angry boasts. He stood there, massive and unmoving, staring at the crowd like a bouncer who'd already decided nobody was getting in. The sheriff arrived minutes later, siren cutting through the chaos. By then, no one was celebrating. The banner sagged. Balloons bounced along the ground like abandoned thoughts. The cyclist was sitting on the grass, scraped but not seriously hurt. Lucky, very lucky. The deputy took statements. A lot of them. Parents talked over each other. Craig gestured wildly. The HOA lawyer whispered into her phone, face pale. When it was my turn, I handed over a folder thick with documentation. "I warned them," I said, multiple times. The deputy nodded. "You did." Craig snapped, "This was an accident." "No," the deputy replied. "This was foreseeable." That word landed heavy. By afternoon, the path was empty. The sheriff taped it off, not because it was illegal yet, but because cooling off was necessary. Hank had been moved back into the north pasture. The cattle settled, chewing slowly as if nothing had happened. But something had. By Sunday, the story was everywhere. Local HOA bike path cuts through active cattle land near miss involving cyclist and steer. Social media did what it always does. Picked sides, simplified facts, sharpened opinions. Some called me reckless. Others called me a hero. Most called the HOA incompetent. Meadowbrick's board issued a statement expressing regret over the incident and promising a thorough review. They did not apologize. They did not close the path. Instead, they doubled down. Monday's county meeting was standing room only. Residents in yoga pants sat next to ranchers in boots. Cyclists clutched helmets. I sat beside my lawyer, hands folded, calm on the surface. Craig spoke first. He presented slides, maps, diagrams. Words like connectivity and community wellness floated through the room. Then my lawyer stood. She put up one map, my map, deed lines in bold red, photos of the fence before and after, the bridge, the signs. "Hank, this land has no easement," she said. "None. The HOA did not seek permission, did not notify the owner, and did not conduct a livestock safety assessment." The county planner cleared his throat. Why wasn't this caught earlier? Craig shifted in his seat. "We relied on preliminary data." "From where?" I asked. Silence. The room turned. The planner sighed. "Until ownership and easement are verified, the county cannot support public use of this path." Murmurs. Relief. Anger. Craig leaned toward me afterward. "You've made your point." "No," I said quietly. "You made mine." 2 days later, I woke up to a different kind of sound. Engines. Heavy ones. I drove down to the pasture and saw an excavator idling near the bridge. Workers in reflective vests stood nearby. For a split second, I thought they were removing it. They were extending it. I slammed my truck door and marched over. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" A foreman shrugged. "HOA contract. We're widening the path." I called my lawyer. She was already on it. By noon, a cease and desist was filed. By 3, the workers were gone. By evening, I received a certified letter. The HOA was suing me. Claim: interference with community infrastructure. Relief sought: recognition of implied easement. Implied: they were trying to turn their mistake into my obligation. The next weeks blurred into depositions and inspections. Surveyors walked my land. Appraisers took notes. Insurance adjusters asked hypothetical questions that made my stomach knot. One afternoon, a Meadowbrick resident showed up alone. Older woman. Soft voice. "I just wanted to say," she said, "we didn't know. They told us it was approved." "I know," I said. "That's a problem." She nodded. "I hope you win." That word, win, started to feel strange. This wasn't a game. It was my home. The trial date was set for late fall. As leaves turned and cattle grew their winter coats, the bike path sat unused, taped and silent. Hank avoided it entirely, as if the land itself had learned not to trust that strip of gravel. On the eve of the trial, Craig requested a meeting. We sat across from each other in a neutral office. No smiles this time. "We're willing to negotiate," he said. "About what?" I asked. "A purchase, or rear out." Quietly. I leaned back. "You should have done that a year ago." He rubbed his temples. "The board is under pressure." "So am I said. "From 6,000 pounds of cattle and 100 years of family history." He looked up. "What do you want?" I thought of the pasture, the creek, Hank's warning charge. "I want my land back," I said, "and I want this never to happen again, to me or anyone else." Craig nodded slowly. "Then we'll see what the judge says." As he left, I stepped outside. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the pasture. Hank lifted his head, watching me. "Almost done," I said. But deep down, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. When the trial day arrived, I felt like I was riding into a showdown I hadn't asked for but could not avoid. The courthouse loomed over the small town like a monument to patience and paperwork. I parked next to my truck, boots crunching gravel, the smell of leather and hay lingering faintly on my jacket. Hank wasn't allowed in the building, thankfully, but he had been on my mind all morning. I imagined him pacing the pasture, nostrils flaring, demanding justice in ways only a steer could. Inside, the room smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. A judge sat behind a bench that felt miles above the floor, papers neatly stacked. The clock called roll, and I realized quickly that everyone from Meadowbrick had dressed as if this were a fashion event rather than a legal dispute. Polo shirts pressed, skirts ironed, smiles at the ready. Craig sat near the front, flanked by the HOA lawyer and 2 board members. I could tell they had rehearsed this. I hadn't, but I had deeds, I had photos, and I had 60 acres of truth backing me. The HOA lawyer stood first. He began with slides, maps, and phrases like community benefit, historical precedents, and implied easement. He spoke as if the land itself didn't exist, as if it were a blank canvas for board members to paint with gravel and caution tape. The audience nodded politely, impressed by words they didn't understand. Then it was my lawyer's turn. She put up a map of my property, the red lines bold against the faded background of the pasture. She showed photos, the fence before, the bridge after, the hoof prints cutting across the path. And then Hank, a picture of him lifting his massive head, nostrils flaring, the cattle around him tense and poised. "This," she said, pointing to the photo, "is active livestock. This is not a park. This is not a trail." And the HOA did not ask permission. Craig's lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Active livestock," he said. "With all due respect, this is common agricultural land that appears unused." "Unused." I snapped. "Unused is a word for land left to rot. This pasture produces beef, history, and livelihood. It is maintained. It is lived on. And it is mine." The room went quiet. You could almost hear the echo of every hoof that had ever stumped these fields. Witnesses were next. I called the local sheriff to testify about the incident during the grand opening. He described the chaos, cyclists slipping, children scared, Hank's warning charge. It was entirely foreseeable, he concluded. No reasonable person would expect large cattle to ignore bicycles. Craig's witnesses argued that the path had community support and that residents assumed it was okay to use it. They even brought in a surveyor who claimed there's historical indication of right-of-way in older maps. Older maps. Maps drawn in pencil decades ago, before I or my father had inherited the land. I had anticipated this. My lawyer demolished it. Historical maps cannot override legal deeds. The property owner's rights are primary. This is not interpretation. It is law. By midday, the debate had moved from maps to motions to interpretations of obscure easement law. I leaned back, exhausted, wishing the room had windows into my pastures. I wanted Hank there, wanted the smell of grass and creek to remind everyone what this land actually was. But courts operate in air conditioning and fluorescent lights, not reality. Then came the climax, testimony from an independent livestock expert. The man was tall, in dusty boots, and carried an air of authority you don't argue with. If this path is active, he said, eyes sweeping the room, and cattle remain within reach of bicycles or pedestrians, there's a measurable risk of injury. Cattle are unpredictable, and their behavior in proximity to crowds is well documented. I felt a little vindicated. The HOA's faces tightened. Craig swallowed, probably realizing that no amount of smiling or community PR would erase physics or biology. Cross-examination was brutal. The HOA lawyer tried to undermine the expert, suggesting that cattle are generally docile and that residents are responsible for their own safety. The expert was unfazed. Animals do not negotiate responsibility, he said. They act on instinct, which is why fencing and access control exist. You cannot outsource that risk to cyclists. After the lunch break, I presented my final argument. I walked to the center, hands unclenched. This is about respect. Respect for property. Respect for livelihood. Respect for life. I gestured toward the back, toward a screen displaying every photo, every hoofprint, every survey flag that the HOA had left behind. You cannot turn land that produces food, employment, and history into a recreational convenience without asking the owner. And if someone gets hurt, or if my cattle get hurt, you will not have my silence to blame. Craig's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. I knew then I had framed this in a way no amount of corporate language could dismiss. Closing arguments followed. The HOA lawyer pleaded for community access, citing health and well-being, neighborhood engagement, and future connectivity. My lawyer spoke for safety, property rights, and legal precedent. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every photograph, every document, every logical point she made landed heavier than any rhetoric. Finally, the judge leaned forward. This court must consider ownership rights, liability, and evidence of trespass. She paused, scanning the room. The evidence presented clearly demonstrates that the land in question is privately owned, actively used for livestock, and no legal easement exists. Any action to establish a public path on this land without explicit consent constitutes trespass. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Craig's shoulders slumped. He whispered something to his lawyer, who shook her head. I sat still, heart thumping, trying not to breathe too loudly. The judge continued. The HOA may seek to negotiate a separate, legally sanctioned easement or purchase with the property owner. Until then, all use of the path through this property is prohibited. Any further trespass will be considered civil and may be escalated accordingly. Relief hit me like the first cool wind of winter. But it wasn't a victory in celebration yet. It was a victory in acknowledgement. I still had to repair the fence, the damage, the trust, and the narrative. After court, I returned to the pasture. Hank was waiting, chewing lazily on the grass as if the whole legal ordeal had never happened. I walked along the path, now officially mine again, and imagined the gravel being lifted, the signs re-erected, the bridge removed. The land had survived the assault. The cattle had survived the threat. And, most importantly, my rights had survived the HOA's hubris. I called my neighbors. No more paths through my pasture, I said. Ever. One neighbor laughed. Finally, someone told them. Yes, I said, staring across the fields. Finally. The court had spoken. The land, the cows, and the pastures were safe. But I knew, deep down, that the story wasn't just about a bike path. It was about respect, boundaries, and remembering that the quiet ones, the people who care for the land, the cattle, the history, aren't the ones to underestimate. That night, as I walked the perimeter fence and tightened the last loose wire, Hank followed, head high, ears twitching. Somewhere in the distance, the meadow brick houses twinkled with lights, oblivious to the legal storm that had just passed. And I whispered to the night, no more shortcuts. Not through my land. Not through my life. For the first time in weeks, the pasture felt quiet again. The week after the trial should have been quiet. It wasn't. Meadow brick didn't disappear quietly into the night, and neither did Craig. Instead, they launched what I quickly dubbed the suburban guerrilla campaign. It started small. Flyers posted on mailboxes, digital notices in neighborhood apps, cheerful messages touting the beautiful community trail now open for exploration. Photos of my pasture appeared, cropped carefully, of course, to remove fences and cows, showing a wide gravel path winding through green fields. People were invited to come see nature and neighbors in perfect harmony. I saw it first when I checked my front porch mailbox. The flyer had bright, cheerful lettering and a smiling cyclist superimposed on what was unmistakably my pasture. I held it in one hand, coffee in the other, and thought, they are relentless. By the next morning, trespassing resumed, but in stealth mode. Bicycles appeared at dawn, not in crowds, but in pairs and threes, winding cautiously along the path. Some attempted to avoid my temporary fencing. Others tried to skirt it entirely. One man even had a map, obviously printed from the HOA's digital posting. Hank and the herd were on alert immediately, snorting, pawing the ground, and moving unpredictably as if sensing intruders they couldn't see yet. I grabbed my truck and drove down to intercept them. This is private property. I shouted, hands on my hips. They froze, surprised. The first cyclist stammered. We thought it was okay now. The HOA. Not okay, I said. Not ever. Leave. Now. Some turned back. Some hesitated, glancing at the herd like they were considering a gauntlet. I wasn't bluffing. The next day, more subtle signs appeared. Chains across the trail. Bright neon ribbons tied to fence posts. My lawyer had advised documentation. Photos, witness statements, timestamps. I began carrying a small camera everywhere, capturing bicycles on the wrong side of the property, hikers stepping over fences, even dogs running through grass while their owners looked confused or apologetic. By midweek, Craig had taken the next step. I found a formal letter from the HOA slipped under my gate. It was polite, almost saccharine. We understand your concerns, but in the interest of community health and wellness, Meadowbrick HOA will continue to maintain access to the community trail. We hope to resolve any misunderstandings amicably. The absurdity of it made me laugh, and then made me furious. Amicably didn't include bulldozing through decades of family history and charging cattle with bicycles. I called my lawyer. They've crossed the line again, I said. Trespass, intimidation, and misrepresentation. What's the fastest way to stop this without turning it into a circus? Her reply was grim. Court orders take time, and the HOA knows it. The more you resist, the more they escalate, like smoke signals from a campfire. They are testing boundaries, and you're the one standing in the fire. Smoke signals. I like that analogy, and I decided to respond in kind. But legally, first, I called in a surveyor to reaffirm the boundaries. Every corner post, every tree line, every creek bend was measured and documented. Then I had my lawyer draft a formal notice. Any unauthorized use of my land would result in immediate civil action. The letter went out, copies to the county and the sheriff's office. Meanwhile, the trespassing escalated. A pair of teenagers came through the northern edge, arguing about whether Hank was aggressive or friendly. One of them fell into a mud puddle after Hank snorted and pawed at the ground. I couldn't help but think, natural consequences. By Friday, it wasn't just cyclists. Neighbors were leaving signs of support for Meadowbrick along the fence line, bunting, cheerful painted rocks, even a hand-painted sign reading, "Nature is for everyone." I took a deep breath. I called Craig again, hoping for a shred of sanity. "Craig," I said, "you need to remove all materials that encourage trespassing. Flyers, apps, posts, everything. This is harassment now." His response was calm, almost rehearsed. "We're simply providing information about community amenities. People are responsible for their own actions." I slammed the phone down. Responsible? Sure. Like the cyclist who almost got gored last weekend was responsible. Like the child whose parents brought her onto my land was responsible. I decided it was time to change tactics. I started hosting what I called pasture watches. Every morning, I patrolled the perimeter with binoculars and my truck. Sometimes I would stop cyclists politely and record their information. Sometimes I just let Hank wander near the fence, visible and majestic, a living reminder that this land was not a playground. Then came the social media escalation. Someone had created a group called Ride the Meadowbrick Trail. Photos of my pasture, again carefully cropped, filled the feed. Parent posted excited comments. Can't wait to bring the kids. So peaceful and beautiful. I documented everything. Every post, every comment, every photo. This wasn't just trespassing. It was deliberate misrepresentation. Evidence. Smoke signals turned into bonfires. By Sunday, the situation reached its peak. A neighborhood kid on a balance bike ventured too close to the cattle. Hank, ever patient but not immortal, bellowed and charged a small distance. The kid panicked and fell, skinned knee, crying, but uninjured. I caught him before he got closer, calmed him, and spoke to the parents firmly. Later, I spoke to the sheriff. This is now beyond trespass, I said. Someone's going to get hurt, and it's on them. I've documented everything. The sheriff nodded. You've got a strong case if it comes back to court. But enforcement on private property takes resources. Smoke signals from Meadowbrick are loud. I laughed darkly. They're loud, but they're also wrong. Monday morning, I received an unexpected visitor, a reporter from the local paper. She had seen the social media posts, heard about the trial, and wanted my side. I told her the story straight. Land ownership, cattle, trespassing, the near miss during the grand opening. She listened, eyes wide, pen scratching furiously. By Tuesday, the article ran. HOA by Paw Trouble's landowner, Pasture, cattle at risk. Suddenly, the tide shifted. Residents began questioning Craig's leadership. Some apologized when they realized the path was literally trespassing. Others removed flyers from mailboxes. Social media posts flipped, now praising the landowner who stood up for safety and property rights. Craig tried to push back, calling emergency HOA meetings, issuing letters, threatening legal action. But the court record from the trial now carried weight. Every tweet, every flyer, every post could be subpoenaed. Meadowbrick smoke signals were now under scrutiny, and the fire they had started was turning back on them. By Thursday, the trespassing had slowed. Cyclists hesitated. The flyers disappeared. Even a few neighbors came to me privately, offering apologies and support. I walked the path that evening, alone. Hank grazed nearby, calm but alert. The bridge still stood, but the crowd had thinned. The gravel was undisturbed. For the first time in weeks, the pasture felt like mine again. I realized then that this wasn't just a fight about a bike path. It was about boundaries, about respect, history, and the fact that some lines, once crossed, demand correction. Meadowbrick smoke signals had warned me of the chaos ahead, but I had survived it. And as the sun set behind the old oak by the creek, casting long shadows across the pasture, I whispered to Hank, "This is our land. Let them remember that." For the first time, I felt a quiet victory, not the kind written in law books or court records, but the kind that smells of grass, cow dung, and quiet determination. The battle wasn't over entirely. Craig and the HOA still existed, and suburban stubbornness never dies. But the path forward, my pasture, my herd, my land, was finally clear. And if anyone tried to build another community amenity here without asking, well, Hank would be ready. The morning after the last trespassing incident, the pasture finally felt quiet. The sun spilled across the grass, highlighting dew on the blades like diamonds scattered carelessly by the hand of God. Hank and the herd grazed lazily, tails swishing, nostrils flaring with contentment. It was a rare moment of calm after weeks of chaos. But I knew better than to trust calm in Meadowbrick. Craig hadn't disappeared. Far from it. By 8 a.m., I spotted his SUV parked near the northern edge of my property, a clipboard in hand. I grabbed my boots and binoculars and headed down to meet him before he could start another inspection of the trail he didn't own. He waved when he saw me, a gesture that now felt almost comical. The sun glinted off his gold watch, and his smile was tight. "Good morning," he said. "Thought we could talk." "About what?" I asked, arms crossed. "The path," he said. "We want to resolve this. Legally, peacefully, amicably." I snorted. "You've been using that word a lot. Funny thing about amicable, it requires respect. You've offered none so far." He sighed. rubbing the back of his neck. Look, we made mistakes. We overstepped, but our residents love the trail. There's value. The only value here, I interrupted, is mine. Property, livelihood, safety. You built a bridge, crushed gravel, and posted signs on my land, and you wonder why I'm upset. Craig glanced at the pasture, where Hank had lifted his head, ears twitching like a general surveying the battlefield. Even without knowing it, he understood the weight of that gaze. You win, he said finally. We'll remove the POA from your land. Officially. Immediately. I blinked. Excuse me. Craig's shoulders slumped. We're filing paperwork to rear out the trail entirely onto HOA property. All signs, posts, and the bridge on your land will be dismantled at our expense. No legal battle. No further trespassing. We just want to avoid more trouble. For a second, I thought this might be another bluff, another smoke signal, but the sincerity or desperation in his voice suggested otherwise. Done, I said. The next few days were a whirlwind. Contractors arrived from the HOA to remove the bridge and dismantle the signage. They worked cautiously, as if stepping on sacred ground. I documented everything, photographing the removal, taking notes, ensuring every scrap of gravel, every misplaced post, every trace of trespass was accounted for. Residents came by, sheepish but curious. One woman with a stroller apologized profusely. We didn't know, we just thought. Thought what? I asked. That it was a public trail. I gestured at the pasture, wide and green. This is a working ranch. You don't get to just decide it's public because it's convenient for your weekend plans. They nodded, embarrassed. Some offered to help clean up the debris. I didn't refuse. It felt good to reclaim the land while teaching a lesson about respect and responsibility. By the end of the week, the trail through my pasture was gone. The bridge lifted, gravel removed, and fencing restored. Hank had overseen the process from the safety of the north pasture, occasionally snorting and stamping, ensuring no one got too comfortable. I walked the path once more, now entirely mine again. The soil was undisturbed, the grass returning after being trampled, and the air smelled of freedom. Every hoofprint left behind by my herd was a reminder that some lines cannot be crossed without consequence. Then came the HOA settlement. Craig agreed to cover the cost of repairs and removal, and the HOA officially acknowledged in writing that the land was private and that any future access required express permission. It wasn't a huge financial windfall, but it was symbolic. Respect finally had a price, and they paid it. Social media quieted. The Ride the Meadow Brick Trail group disbanded. Flyers disappeared. Posts of smiling cyclists vanished. Instead, neighbors began posting photos of Hank, grazing peacefully, often captioned, "The real guardian of Meadow Brick." I chuckled every time I saw one. My livestock had inadvertently become local celebrities. I didn't mind. Maybe it would teach a few people to respect boundaries. One evening, I walked the perimeter fence with my lawyer and a couple of trusted neighbors. The sun was low, casting golden light over the pasture. Hank followed at a distance, ears twitching, tail flicking. The herd moved calmly, as if they understood that danger had passed and order had returned. "Feels like peace," one neighbor said. "Feels like respect," I corrected. "Peace is temporary. Respect lasts." Later, I updated my land records, posted permanent, no trespassing, active Cattl land signage, and even installed cameras at key points. This wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. The Meadow Brick saga had taught me that people, well-meaning or not, don't always stop when they should. I also took the time to reconnect with Hank and the herd in a deeper way. I walked among them, brushing their backs, repairing water troughs, checking fences. Every moment was a reminder. This land was alive, and it needed protection. My protection, their protection, and sometimes both are the same thing. A month later, I received an unexpected letter from a Meadow Brick resident. Handwritten. Simple. "Thank you for standing up for what's right. I hope the HOA learned that land and life deserve respect. Your pasture is beautiful, and I promise not to cross it again." I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Maybe it was small, but it meant something. Change often comes slowly, but sometimes it comes with hoof prints and gravel as it teaches. By the end of the season, the pasture was thriving. Grass grew tall and thick. Fences were sturdy, water fresh and clear. Hank and the herd moved through it with ease, grazing, resting, living as they had for decades. And for the first time in weeks, I could sit on the porch, coffee in hand, and just watch. Watch the land I had fought for, the cows I had defended, and the life I had chosen. Quiet, calm, and finally respected. Meadow Brick never tried another path through my property. The HOA eventually rerouted their trail entirely within community-owned land, marking it clearly. Residents respected the boundaries. And I learned something crucial. Sometimes the fight isn't about the land itself. It's about the people who value it, the history it holds, and the lines that cannot be crossed without consequence. I glanced at Hank, who met my eyes with a slow blink. "We did it, boy," I said. He snorted in reply, as if saying, "Of course we did. We're the ones in charge here." And in that moment, with the sun dipping behind the hills, shadows long and golden, I realized that victory wasn't loud, flashy, or triumphant in a parade. It was quiet. It was steady. It was the land, the cattle, and the truth standing together. The HOA had learned their lesson. The pasture was safe, and life returned to its rhythm. Gravel paths may tempt the curious, and suburban smoke signals may flare up, but some lines, like those marked by fences, deeds, and hoof prints, are sacred, and crossing them comes at a cost. Hank lifted his head again, nostrils flaring, the wind catching his menere. I smiled. "Don't worry, boy," I said. "No more shortcuts. This pasture is ours." And for the first time in months, I truly believed it.